Then this remarkable result followed, that the civil head of the municipium disappeared. The ecclesiastical authority took the place of the old civil authority, and the bishop became the natural chief, the real mayor of the borough. His election and the part which the citizens took therein became the important business in the towns, and thus it was that the Roman customs and Roman corporate life were preserved for a while by the clergy. As I have already stated, between the old municipal regulations of Rome and the municipal regulations of the burghers of the Middle Ages, the municipal rule of the ecclesiastical body intervened. The conversion of the Frankish kings to the Christian faith, as I shall show by and by, served to enlarge the influence thus obtained by the clergy. And this, so far as corporate life and spirit are concerned, was not unproductive of benefit to the progress of civilization and to the settlement of society in Europe. Now, if this influence was beneficial in respect of municipal institutions, it was equally so in respect of the agricultural portion of the community, and this I shall endeavor to make clear, first by exhibiting to you the condition of the cultivating portion of the community under the Roman rule, and then by pointing out what were the ameliorations in their condition effected by the clergy. The rural districts played a very small part in Roman society. The preponderance of the cities was immense, but for the efforts of the ecclesiastics to maintain and improve their lot, the rural inhabitants might have died out altogether. Under the Roman rule, the special class inhabiting the rural districts and devoting themselves to agricultural labors were called coloni, rustici, originari, adscripti, inquilini, tributari, censiti. And their condition was this: they were not slaves. They could contract legal marriages. They could serve in the Roman armies. They could hold property. But then their liberty was confined to very narrow limits and was subject to very harsh conditions. They were attached to the estates, serviterae, gleboi inherentes. Under no pretext could they quit the domain to which they belonged, and if they did make their escape, the proprietor had a right to claim them wherever he found them. Like slaves, they were subject to corporal punishment, not so frequently as slaves, but in certain cases and to certain punishments, from which freemen were exempt. Although they could hold property, that property was not complete nor truly independent. They enjoyed it at their will. They transmitted it to their family, but they were forbidden from alienating it without their master's consent. On the other hand, they possessed, as a sort of compensation for their hard condition, some advantages. I will mention two. The proprietors could not separate them from the domain. They could only be sold with the estate, and the estate could not be sold without them. The rent which they paid the proprietor of the soil, a rent almost always paid in kind and called redditus, annuae functiones, could not in any case be raised. It was always to remain the same, as fixed by ancient customs and independent of the will of the proprietors. By the first, as you may easily see, their security, if not their liberty, was guaranteed. By the second, the idea of an immutable land tax, one of the most efficacious causes of the agricultural prosperity of a country, was created, and if other circumstances had not diminished its benefits in the Roman Empire, the evils of the condition of the colony would to some extent have been counterbalanced by it. But unfortunately, in addition to this fixed rent which they had to pay to the proprietors of the soil, they were subjected to a less fixed and more onerous tax. There were two great contributions payable to the imperial treasury. a land contribution by the proprietors and a personal contribution or capitation tax by all the inhabitants of the territory. The capitation tax was charged upon the proprietors in the first instance, but they wrung it out of the cultivators. It was always increasing and was a source of constant vexation. But it was always increasing and was a source of constant vexation towards the laborers. It destroyed to a great extent the benefit derivable from the exaction of a fixed and ascertained rent. And hence with other causes came the decline of the agricultural population, which preceded the invasion of the barbarians and facilitated its success. At the period then of the conquest by the barbarians, and when they had firmly established themselves on Roman territory, they found almost all the rural population reduced to a condition little better than that of bond laborers. At the same time, the Roman Church possessed considerable territorial property, and towards the improvement of the ordinary cultivators. In proof of this, letter addressed by Gregory the Great, AD 590 to 604, to the subdeacon Peter, the officer charged with the administration of the property of the church in Sicily. See Guizot's History of Civilization in France, Vol 3, page 136, translated by Win Hazlitt, Bonn edition 1846, and at page 147 of the same volume, the Ordinance of Louis le Gros on the demand of Thibault, abbot of St. Pierre de Fosses. We may rejoice to know and to acknowledge, says Sir James Stephen, in his lectures on the history of France, Vol 1, lecture 1, page 37, that in Gaul the early church was the one great antagonist of the wrongs which were then done upon the earth, that she narrowed the range of fiscal tyranny, that she mitigated the overwhelming poverty of the people, that she promoted the accumulation of capital, that she contributed to the restoration of agriculture, that she balanced and held in full check the imperial despotism, and that she revived within herself the remembrance and the use of the great franchise of popular election. Nothing truer than what is here stated. But I shall have to advert to this particular subject again and to notice somewhat in detail the rise of the clergy to power and influence, political as well as social, the causes therefore and the special consequences resulting therefrom. At the same time, the Roman Church possessed considerable territorial property, and towards the improvement of the ordinary cultivators' lot, as well as towards the amelioration of the condition of their own laborers, the efforts of the ecclesiastical proprietors were assiduously directed. Well, then, at the fall of the empire, what did the barbarian invaders of Europe find? They found, it is true, an imperial head of the empire, but one whose power was almost nil and whose authority was utterly despised. They found a people without national feeling, ignorant of national sentiment, and reduced to a state of utter apathy. A nation composed of a privileged class and of an impoverished lower class, the middle class no longer existing. They found towns governed by heads and possessed of regulations, but pauperized by the exactions of the imperial city. They also found a powerful, vigorous, and well-trained body of ecclesiastics in whose hands had fallen the real direction of corporate business. Moreover, they found an agricultural population ground down by the exactions of the proprietors under whom they worked and destitute of any notion of freedom. Still, they find a remnant of municipal life, and in spite of what more recent writers are inclined to hold, viz. That modern corporate life owes very little to Roman customs and law, I venture to maintain that the idea of municipal institutions not only is of Roman origin, but is largely influenced by the old Roman spirit that was caught and worked upon by the barbarian invaders of Italy and Gaul. Further, I hold that the enforced connection of the agricultural laborer with the land on which he was born, and this, as we know, reappeared as one of the peculiarities of the feudal notions, is traceable to the institutions of imperial Rome. I now go on to show the effect of the barbarian invasion and settlement upon Europe in respect of social life and constitutional ideas. One consequence of the invasions of the barbarian hordes by which the Roman Empire was overrun was to put an end to all regular, habitual, and easy intercourse between the various parts of the territory and to all security, all hope of comfort in the future. In Gaul, Roman society was destroyed. The ties by which Rome had been enabled to combine together the various parts of the Roman world were loosened. That great system of administration, of imposts, of recruiting, of public works, of roads was overthrown. What remained was nothing save the wreck of municipal institutions. Under the Roman imperial administration, the governors of provinces, the consuls, the presidents fill the scene and reappear in the laws and in the history of Rome. In the 6th century, though the Roman titles of duke, count, or prefect survived, their power and duties were of a different character. The title comes was applied to several classes of officials and dates from a somewhat early period of the imperial government of Rome. In the first stage of their existence in Roman polity, the comites were assessors and advisors attached to the retinue of the governor of a province or some other high official. Though they attained to the dignity of companions of the imperial court, eventually they were advanced to the position of governors of provinces, superintending the general administration as well as the military arrangements therein. In the Theodosian Code, the collective body of the comites is styled comitiva. For approved merit in the discharge of the duties of a public official, a person was inscribed in the comitiva and received by way of distinction the title comes. In his treatise, De Re Militari, cited in the Digest 49, blah, 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 an old writer, Arius Meander, speaks of the dux as synonymous with preses militium, or general in command. In the Theodosian Code, dux and comes are described as occupying positions of equal dignity in the provinces, and as entrusted with the duties of general superintendents of all the military in each respective province. In Sicily, the dux was of equal authority to that of the praetor, and in a rescript from the emperors Honorius and Theodosius the Younger, circa AD 407 to AAA Stilicho, the latter is addressed as comes et magister utrusque militia, and is directed to order the comites and duces militium to carry out a strict inquiry in respect of a charge of certain abuses which had crept into his province in the matter of elections to the posts of tribunes and prefects of the cohorts. The titles counts and dukes, says Gibbon, have obtained in modern languages so very different a sense from their Roman form that their use may occasion some surprise, but it should be recollected that the second of those appellations is only a corruption of the Latin word which was indiscriminately applied to any military chief. All these provincial generals were therefore dukes, but no more than 10 among them were dignified with the rank of count or companion, a title of honor or rather favor, which has been recently invented in the court of Constantine. Which had been recently invented in the court of Constantine. A gold belt was the ensign which distinguished the office of the counts and dukes, and besides their pay they received a liberal allowance sufficient to maintain 190 servants and 158 horses. According to Savigny, the history of This office and title viscomis in the Frankish system of polity is as follows, beginning with the period of time that Tacitus dealt with, see Germania. We have evidence of the existence of certain chief men elected by popular vote into the national councils whose duty it was to administer justice in the cantons and villages. Coming down to later times, as the old laws and documents show, we read of an official occupying much the same position and discharging the same duties among the Franks called graf, gratio, gravio, grafio, on the settlement of the Franks in the conquered countries, carrying with them as they did many, if not all, of their ancient customs and national modes of trial. The Graf made his appearance as a judicial dignitary, and that by name. To this name the Roman people gave as a translation the term that they were familiar with, because the duties and position of each seemed much alike. That term was comes, and so in course of time the two titles were in use as meaning the same office, each having the same original meaning, vis companion. Grafio and comes continued in existence together for many years before the complete merging of the former in the latter took place. Each title was used and was recognized. The Frankish official was called Graf. The Roman official was called comes. Hence we find that even as late as the time of Charlemagne, the title Grafio as well as comes is in existence, and we read of duces, comites, domestici, officers of the royal household, vicari, in later days called vicecomites, grafiones, and centenari, all named together, and that so late as the 9th century. In the 6th century, though the Roman titles of duke, count, or prefect survived, their power and duties were of a different character. The old separation between the civil and military professions vanished, and under the duke, count, or prefect, the command of the troops and the administration of justice were united. Thus the towns existed, but the rural districts became the prey of the barbarians. It was there they established themselves with their men. There they introduced new institutions and a new organization. In the ancient German communities, two social conditions are visible. One, that of the society or tribe, with a decided tendency to sedentary habits, and existing upon a limited territory cultivated by means of laborers and slaves. The other, that of the warfaring horde, grouped round some famous chief and leading a wandering life. When a tribe, small in number as were all the German tribes, occupied a limited territory, when each head of a family was established upon his domain, in the midst of the people, the social organization continued for a time. The assembly of proprietors of heads of families decided upon all matters. Each tribe had its own assembly. Justice was dispensed by the freemen themselves under the direction of the older members, and so in time a kind of public polity arose between the confederate tribes. This is the form of free institutions met with in the infancy of nations. The organization of the warfaring band was different. Another principle is visible here, that of the patron, of the chief, of aristocratic clientship and military subordination. The German warfaring band therefore contained a political element not possessed by the tribe, viz. Arbitrary power and enforced obedience. And this is an influence that prevails in warlike bodies, with more force than in communities that do not recognize war as their chief and dominating idea. At the same time, the spirit of freedom thereby engendered was great. No man engaged himself against his will. The warriors chose their chief and his companions, but undertook nothing unless he had given his own free will to the adventure. Nor was the inequality between the chiefs and their men of large proportions. In fact, it was little more than the natural inequality arising from superior strength, skill, or courage. Although the chief had the biggest share of the booty, Though he possessed more horses and more arms, he was not so far above his companions in wealth as to be able to insist upon their attendance without their own consent. Each warrior entered into the warlike association with his strength and courage, differing very little from the others, and at liberty to leave when he pleased. Now, the characteristic fact, the great result of the invasion as regards the Germans, was their change to the condition of proprietors, the cessation of the wandering life, and the definitive establishment of the agricultural life. And the consequence of this as regards the warfaring band or tribe was as follows. When the tribe was transplanted to Gaul, the habitations were further dispersed. The chiefs of families established themselves at a greater distance from one another. They occupied vast domains. Their houses afterwards became castles. Their villages, which were grouped around them, were no longer peopled with inhabitants who were free, who were their equals, but with laborers attached to their lawns. Thus the tribe became dissolved by the very fact of its new establishment. The effect upon its institutions was this. The assembly of the freemen was now got together with greater difficulty. So long as they had lived near one another, there was no need of any pressure or persuasion in order to induce the members to meet and discuss their affairs in common. But when a population is scattered, in order that the principles and forms of free institutions may be continued, a great social development is necessarily implied. Riches, intelligence, many things, in fact, become factors which hitherto had been wanting to a rough German horde, transported to a territory far more extensive than what it had ever before occupied. When once the tribe was established in Gaul, the assemblies of the freemen became less frequent, so that in the middle of the 8th century we find, instead of the old weekly and monthly gatherings in each division, but 3 assemblies in the year, and these not regularly kept. In the more primitive times, when these assemblies were frequent, the freemen under the name of Rachimburgi, Arimani, Boni Omines, the possession of freedom was the distinctive mark of the members of the old German body, and the basis of the Germanic organization was the class of freemen. What the old German folk understood by freedom was not mere liberty as opposed to slavery, but the complete recognition and enjoyment of rights of all kinds. This view of a man's position in his tribe or clan corresponds with the Roman terms caput and civis optimo jude. All the original Teutonic invaders claimed their privilege to stand on this ground. But the terms by which each body of freemen was known were different. Among the Lombards, Arimani was the name whereby the ancient freemen of the north were marked, and that name was applied to the female as well as the male members of the race. Liberae femine et arimane are the words of the Lombard law of Ratchis. Later on, that is at the time of Charlemagne, as a diploma of the year AD 808 shows us, the title of Arimani had received a meaning somewhat more special. It was confined to the free Lombards who constituted the National Assembly. Before the introduction of fiefs, i.e. before the era of feudalism, and the term ali liberi homines, which appears in the same diploma, is used by way of contradistinction to that of Arimani as intended to cover the Roman inhabitants, the German incomers, the Franks, and such free vassals as had acknowledged a lord and were not members of the Bierbon, under the comes, where the term liberi homines stands by itself in the old documents. It must be taken to be identical with Arimani and to mean a free Lombard. The Arimani shared in the administration of justice equally with the Escavini or Echevins, and in the later documents the word Germanus is used as being synonymous with Arimanus. This is especially noteworthy in the historical documents published between the 8th and the 12th centuries. The term Arimani was also applied to the citizens of a town, for these also were freemen. This use of the word does not appear earlier than the beginning of the 9th century. Thus, the Arimani of Mantua are spoken of somewhere about the 11th or 12th century. But the older the document, the more precise it is the meaning of the term Ariman, that which I have already given, viz. Free Lombards. From Arimanus, we get the term Arimania. This term has 3 significations. It is used as noting the collective body of the Arimani, forming a Cauton, or any other community. In this form, it is mentioned in Markov. Our Fidelis comes here to our palace with his Arimania. It was also used as a mark of distinction between full property in land and that which was of an emphyteutic character, a perpetual lease on condition of the regular payment of rent, or which was of the nature of a fief. In this sense, Arimania is equivalent to the dominium ex jude quiditium of the old Roman law, and it may be taken that it was a proof of freemanship on the owner's part. See as to this Muratori, citing the deposition of a witness in a suit between the Pope and the Bishop of Ferrara in the year A.D. 1182. Arimania also meant a special kind of tax. That tax was one which the comes of the district was authorized to levy on all the inhabitants of his district to provide for the general expenses during a time of war. As to the etymology of the word Savigny has examined this matter with great care and skill. His conclusion is that the root of the word is body, i.e. beer, which means a collective body, the people. Hence, Ariman was a man of the people, and whether called Arimani or Ede Liagi, or all to whom either appellation was appropriate, are to be taken as the men of the whole Lombard body, free in every sense of the term. As to the etymology meaning of the word Rachimburgus, there has been much learned discussion and various opinions have been propounded. I will not dwell on these, but refer to such of my readers as may be desirous of examining them to Von Savigny's learned disquisition thereon. The conclusions he draws are these. First, as to the etymology of the word, the root of it may be taken to be rec, which means great, notable, illustrious. Next, as to the locality to which it belongs, this was the country where the Franks settled. Then, as to its meaning, this must be understood as being precisely the same as that of Ariman. The Frankish Rachimburg was like the Lombard Ariman, the freeman, the member of the conquering tribe. The same rights that the Ariman claimed and possessed, the same did the Rachimburg claim and possess. Therefore, like the former the latter, among other privileges, obtained that of being present at the malum or public assembly and of taking part in the public administration of justice. On the complete settlement of the Franks in Gaul, 2 other terms, Latin ones, were applied to the Rachimburgivis, liberi homines and boni homines, and in time it came about that bonus homo and Rachimburgus were used by the Frankish historians as identical expressions. Eventually, the term Rachimburgus gave way to that of bonus homo. To sum up the matter then concisely, the Arimani were the freemen who, under the Lombard domination for the national body, formed the national body of those who were entitled to appear at the popular meetings and take part in all popular national discussions. The Rachimburgs were identically the same in that part of Europe where the Frankish immigrants were located. After their complete settlement in Gaul, their name was Latinized into Liberi homines and Boni homines. The former term designated their position and rights as freemen. The latter term marked the fact that they were not only free but were untainted with any charge of crime or misconduct, for this would have disabled them from taking part in the popular assemblies.